Hi, welcome to the episode 2 of Working Inside of Silhouette, the step-by-step series. And in the last session, we had discussed about some very basic things about Silhouette. And in this session, I'm going to go a little deeper into how you should go about setting up your project and look into few more things related to it. All right, so let's get into it. The first thing that you see when you open Silhouette is nothing but a blank interface. Now I'll make an attempt to go over the basic interface components so that you become a little more familiar with how you're going to be working inside of Silhouette. And I'm going to be starting that by going into the file menu here, and I'm going to open up our last project, which was this car that we had seen in the last episode. Now I just opened this project so that we have something to see in the viewer and we're not looking at a blank interface. Now let's go over the basic components of the interface in a clockwise fashion like this. So I'm going to start with this panel right here which says sources, and this is where you're basically going to be importing all of your sources, all of your image sequences that you're going to be working with. All right, so let's say that I have to work with another sequence, so I will basically be double clicking here, and I am going to switch to episode 2 now, and I have another footage here again from pixels, and you can see that I have the second image sequence loaded up here, and if I double click on it I can see what's there inside the footage. So that's basically what the sources panel is going to do. Now let's move up in the clockwise fashion, and this is what is known as the viewer, and this is basically where you're going to be viewing a lot of your sources, a lot of your image sequences. All right, and this is where the majority of your roto work or any of the compositing tasks that you're going to execute, those are going to happen. And on top of that, this section right here, I would say this is the heart of Silhouette. This is like the control panel of whatever you want to work with. A lot of controls are there, so I'm going to go over each one of them as and when a need of talking about it arises. All right, but just understand for now that this is the control panel is right here. Okay, now moving on to this side, this is what I would see as the trees section, right? And why I'm calling it trees, because this is where a lot of your node work is going to happen. Now Silhouette FX is a node based application. It's basically being utilized in the industry for a lot of visual effects work, and a lot of compositing work is being done inside of Silhouette. So whatever domain you are working in, whether it's paint, whether it's roto, whether it's compositing, all of that has to be picked up from this section, which is it says nodes here, and a lot of work that is going to uh, be related to this section. So you're basically going to pick up a lot of nodes from here and then drop them here in the trees section, and then you're going to be continuing your work. More of that in a future session when we actually get down to working. Down here, this is where I would say that this is your properties section. A lot of controls, or I would say properties related to a lot of things are related, can be adjusted here. Right next to this panel here is your nodes well, I would say, because this is where all of your nodes are stored. All right, so you just need to come here, you can select one of these, or you can even go ahead and search for one of them. Cool stuff. If we look here at the bottom, you have the node section and the timeline. So definitely yes, we do have a timeline here. So when we are going to be working inside Silhouette on some project, a lot of it is going to be based on the timeline here. Okay, so that's basically how the interface here of Silhouette is organized. And now let's get into how to basically set up your project. All right, now when you set up a project, there are essentially three parts to it. First one is something that we have already done, and that was importing an image sequence. All right, the next part is to save your project, or basically create a new project, and that you do by coming here into new project section, and it says project has been modified and not been saved. Save, yes. Okay, so I am going to be creating a new project here, and I'm going to go to my location essentially, and I'm going to choose the location. I'm going to pick up a new folder, and I'm going to call it SI files, which are Silhouette files. I'm going to say open. That's the location, and now I'm going to name my project road. I like to name my files with a small or a lowercase letter, 01, and then I'm going to say create. So that's how you basically go about creating a project. The next step is to basically now go about importing your media into this project. Okay, so you have created a project. Second part is to essentially choose the image sequence that you would want to work with. So I'm going to say open, right? So I'm working inside this project, and the image sequence that I want to work with is this. All right, so that's the second part. The third part is basically to create a session. All right, and you would want to think of a session as something similar to what we have in After Effects as a composition, right? So whenever we are working inside After Effects, we first need to create a composition, right? And this is exactly similar to that. So you could do that in one of the three ways. One would be to go to session here and come here to new session. Okay, I'll hit escape. Second would be to hit command or control N, and that also pops up the same dialog box. And the third method would be to just essentially drag and drop it into the trees panel here. That is also going to give you the same dialog box. And talking about this dialog box, I am going to name this something relevant. So I'm going to call this road side, and I can choose from one of the templates and the workspace. So for example, if I am going to be working on the roto, or let's say if I'm working on the paint or roto plus paint or composite, I can choose one of them. Now what this is going to do is this is going to load up some basic nodes in the trees section, and workspace is also something that is going to be aligned to what you want to work inside of. So if you're not very sure of what you want to work with, you can just start off with the composite template, and this is also going to default to composite. That's fine, not a problem. Silhouette is quite intelligent to pick up the format by itself, the size, the pixel aspect ratio, even the duration and the frame rate. But it's always a good idea to double check what the frame rate is in relation to your video, right? Because a lot of times what would happen is if your frame rates are not matching up, you're in for big trouble. Later on, there's absolutely no way to get around it, and you're going to mess up your entire project. So just double check your frame rates. always. Okay, and then let's say okay. So as soon as you say okay, there suddenly there is a change in the interface, and the composite workspace takes over, and there is something inside your trees section here, and what you see here is your project, the session loaded up. All right, so let's say, for example, if you have another session that you want to create inside the same project. Now inside the same project means this, you can do that. You could take a new session, for example, here, and let's say road 2, for example, or let's say car. We'll load up the first, let's choose the image sequence, then let's go ahead and create. So that's my source, and I'm going to create a new session here, and I'm going to choose car. Everything is aligned, not to worry. I then say okay. Okay, so I have two sessions going on here. So I have roadside, I have car, both of them are loaded up here, and this is what you call a node, right? And you can see that they both are connected by a wire, which is this, and I'm going to be talking about these in a lot more detail in the coming sessions, so don't worry about them too much. All right, and here in the timeline you can see that there is something that says output, and everything that you're going to work on is going to line up here. So that's how basically you go about saving your project, creating your project, creating new sessions, loading up your footages, etc. So now let's look at how the nodes function. How do they work? All right, so like I said earlier also, that this is something that I call, or Silhouette likes to call, the wire, and these wires can be connected or disconnected. You're free to make your own connections manually, or you can do them automatically as well. So let's see both of these methods. So I am going to be searching for the filter category here, and let's look at the first node which says blur. Okay, so I'm going to just drag and drop this right here in the trees section, and I'm going to just middle click and drag this to the side right on the mouse. And now the way that you can make these work together is by connecting them, and like I said, there are two ways to do it. Let me show you the automatic way, and then we will look at the manual way also. So just keep in mind always that an output node always lands into the input of the other node. Okay, so let's just make some space out here, and let's bring the blur node right in the middle here. So as soon as you bring it in the range, the wires turn blue on both the sides, like on the output side as well as on the input side. Now as you can already see that the effect of this node has started showing up in the viewer. The footage is essentially blurred. Now I could take this wire off, I could break the connection, and then there would be nothing, and I could connect it back also like that, and I would have the resulting footage getting blurred. And all the controls, the properties, the parameters are available here. You can basically go about increasing or decreasing the blur amount like that. Okay, so that's also there, and as well as you can even go about animating it. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little later. So that's one part of it. Another part is that you can create copies of your uh, nodes also. So I have the output node here, so I can basically create a copy of this node. I can hit Control or Command C on my keyboard, and I can just simply paste it here. So now what I have is another copy of the output, which is output 1. Okay, and I could just basically do a before and after by creating a uh, branched look to it, or the arrangement to it, so that now when I click on this, I will have two versions of the same footage, one which would be blurred, and one which would be the normal version of it. All right, so now let's go ahead and search for another node here, which is low contrast, and let's drop this right here. Okay, now I could have this coming into this first, and then this coming into this. Okay, so I have two versions here. Now I could even have this branching off after getting blurred, and you could have this version of it. Okay, rather, let's connect this to here. Okay, so I'll have low contrast applied on this as well as on this, so I will have two variations of the same footage. And this is what I like to call the branched network, and this is essentially what the trees section here, the panel here, is going to hold up for. Okay, so that's basically how the nodes are going to work, and there are different types of nodes as well, and by that I mean that here what I have is an input and an output uh, portions to a particular node, but there would be some certain nodes which would have more than two connections to it, which are possible. And we are going to talk about it in a little while in the coming sessions throughout the course. Okay, so bear with me. So I hope that these basics are clear, and I'm going to see you in the next session now.